Hello, let me tell you about a fella called Joop Donkervoort. He was the importer of Lotus 7s a few decades ago, but what he found when he imported them into continental Europe is that they weren't actually road legal, so he had to make a few minor adjustments to make them fit for the continent's roads. Turns out he didn't stop there, and at some point over the ensuing decades the car took on its own personality until it reaches, well, the level of this, the Donkervoort D8. This car came out with Audi 5-cylinder power in 2011, but Joop turned 70 last year, and his family, who still run the company, decided they'd do something a little bit special for him. And this GTO-JD70 is that very car. So what is it? Well, it's a two-seat roadster of the sort of Caterham shape still, if you like, but it's been taken to, well, something of another level in terms of performance and power. In the front is that aforementioned 2.5 litre 5-cylinder Audi motor, which is in the TTRS and the RS3, and here it has been turned up to 415 horsepower. It still sits in a tubular steel chassis, but there's carbon fibre around it, and there's a very fancy carbon fibre system called X-Core, which Donkervoort has actually patented. It is now starting to sell to other people. It's very thin layers of carbon fibre, but instead of just a foam core that you bond the carbon fibre onto, you create a mould and it's kind of expanded and heated from the inside. It's a really, really clever material. And anyway, the carbon fibre helps stiffen the chassis, so it has 20,000 Newton meters per degree of torsional rigidity, which is a kind of industry standard level. It weighs only 50 kilograms, so despite having a 2.5 litre 5-cylinder turbocharged lump in the front, this car weighs less than 700 kilos, 680 kilograms, which is quite something. It's now on these Nankang track day tyres, which are pretty special by all accounts. Donkervoort says this car will pull 2G laterally. We won't have the opportunity on the roads today to test that, but otherwise there are still 2 seats in here. There's a 5-speed manual gearbox. It is rear-wheel drive via a limited slip differential, and other changes for this JD70 model are the fact that it gets a little aerodynamic scoops on the front wing to get rid of some of the air that generates lift, and also new emissions regulations. This car goes through European limited volume type approval, which means that it has to meet emissions regulations, which this year includes a petrol particulate filter. Now, the problem with those is they steal noise and they add a bit of weight, but on the plus side, actually, what Donkervoort found is that they could do without one of the mufflers, which would usually sit at the back, which means you can have this rather sexy side exit exhaust, which sits above, look, this lovely, lovely carbon fibre weave. It's the sort of company that makes the cars however you want to. They do everything in-house. They don't buy the chassis in from elsewhere. They make it all by hand, so you can sort of tweak it to your own personal specification and so on. There are not loads of sort of comfort specs, but if you want different carbon weave, if you want different dampers and things like that, they will do that for you. This is Joop Donkervoort's own car. This is built for him, so it doesn't have the power steering, which is optional, doesn't have the ABS, which is optional. Sounds like a pretty hardcore kind of bloke, doesn't he? So I'm going to hop in and take his very own car for a gentle drive. Ooh. Scorchio, and so we are inside. What is a very nicely put together cabin. It feels really good quality in here. Everything feels really solid. Lots of carbon fibre everywhere, but it feels really nicely constructed. Because the windscreen is more sloped than you get on typical Caterham-esque cars, and because of these high windows, it's actually very habitable in here. You know, you don't get the wind whipping round into your face. Where there are similarities, I mean, you and a passenger sit close together, perfectly fine. And there is a little bit of sort of door impingement on your elbow room. But there's a nice driving position. The seat does move backwards and forwards. There's a little adjustable inflatable lumbar support. This steering is unassisted, and electric power steering is an option. And at this sort of weight, with the weight of this kind of engine over the front, at parking speeds, it's about 2.3 turns lock to lock, this steering. It's fearsomely heavy at parking speeds, but as you get going, livens right up. And it's really nice, really responsive, on pretty smooth roads, but the ride is nicely composed. In creating a car for this model year, putting on the petrol particulate filter increased the torque a bit at low revs. So what Donkervoort has done is increase the gear ratios, just by lengthening the final drive slightly, so you can surf on the torque. Sort of fizzes along this engine, and you can hear a little bit of gearbox whine, as is common on open cars like this. But you can just hear I hope you can hear, I can. You can hear that little 5-cylinder warble. And it's really, yes, it's not as light as a Caterham still is, but it's fearsomely quick. And you can tell this is not a heavy car. Gear shift quality is excellent. I mean, it's a really short throw. It's quite a heavy physical shift, but there's nothing wrong with that in a car like this. And actually, as you pick up the speed a bit, everything just gels together a bit more nicely. You know, the steering lightens up at speed, and as you start to put in bigger inputs, it all develops a really nice flow to it. And that's one of the keys to a really low volume car. Donkervoort just builds 50 a year of these. And that's one of the things that I think a big manufacturer takes a really long time to get right, is all the little tuning of the control weights and everything like that. So when you get into a Ford, it feels like a Ford, and it has all of that good stuff. Sometimes you get into a low cost, low volume self-build, or even high cost, low volume car, and just things are wrong. The gear sticks in the wrong place, or the pedal weights are all wrong, or the throttle pedal is low but the clutch is high. This is ergonomically really well sorted, really brilliantly sorted. There's a lovely clear dashboard of both high quality, and everything makes sense. If I click this sport button and I'm on the brakes, it blips downshifts for me, and it gets them absolutely right every time. I'd rather do it myself, because it's that sort of car. But there's a heater, there's a hood, there's actually a big boot. And in moving to the side exit exhaust, it won't cook whatever's in the boot. That has also allowed a bigger rear diffuser to be put on the back. Now, in gaining that big engine in the front, it does feel a bigger car to me, not just because of the high window line and everything else. It does just feel slightly larger than a Caterham. It feels a slightly different thing. It doesn't feel as small and agile and nimble, but I don't think that's a bad thing. This is still a small car with a lot of agility and a lot of performance, and you'll pay a reasonable amount of money for the performance and the quality and all of the composites that you get. This car is 141,000 quid, so yeah, 140 grand, and in the fact that I've got a manual gearbox, it's a fairly old school kind of thing, front engine, rear drive, 2-seat roadster. But it's as fast as a supercar. It does 60 in 2.7 seconds, they reckon, and it'll do 170 miles an hour flat out, and get it on the right place, it'll do 2G laterally. The lovely thing is, and this isn't true of all supercars, I'm at low speed on a Dutch road and I'm having a great time as well. It's really, the feel-some steering, the manual gear shift, I'm getting a lot back, and I'm sitting in a nice place in the sunshine with lovely carbon fibre and beautiful finishing all around. This is my first time in a Donkervoort, and I've got to say I am coming away well impressed. I think it's a really terrifically engineered, good fun piece of kit, and I like it very much. I really like it a great deal.